Hi YouTube, Clinton here. I'm going to show you how to make this Roman Gladiator armor that I made. I based this off of the arm piece that I saw in Blood and Glory. It's an app game. If you don't know a bit about it, look it up. You should easily find it. It's pretty prominent. It's a really fun game, but pretty hard. Anyways, I based this off of the first armor, except I made mine black instead of red and silver instead of white. But in any case, this is somewhat hard and it's kind of advanced. I mean, most of the materials are somewhat hard to find around, home. A lot of people say when they do their how-tos, it's pretty easy. This is not easy. This is a lot of things you specifically need. You could make, improvements on depending on what kind of materials you have. You could, instead of use leather, you could use straps of some kind. Leather is better for the way I use to strap it down with. With straps, you'd have to do something different because straps would tear where I made a cut here. You could use tin, just normal tin like off siding. That would work, but you're going to have to try and crimp these edges by folding them with pliers or something. What my tin I used out of was I'm guessing about millimeter tin or steel that I got out of a oil barrel. You get them with, if you ever get oil in bulk like we do on the farm for our utilities and our machines and stuff like that, you would get that kind of steel. I cut it out with a torch and then I learned that these are strong enough to cut through it. You may need to watch how dull they get. I'm not quite sure how hard they are on this, if this is a really good way of cutting it. Otherwise, it's kind of a really big pain because your torch, if you know how to use torches, it does not work very well trying to make a nice clean edge. Anyway, back to this. How I made it was, I first made this piece. This is the first one I made. I made the first biggest one. And afterwards, after I had made it, I just cut it out to what I thought the size would be. I kind of based it off of how big the person's hands are by figuring out some kind of sloppy math to find kind of a relative size. And after that, then once I'd cut it out and I'd formed it down, I just rolled it on simply like this, and then made sort of a took the chalk here. Where is it? Chalk. And I just sort of made just a line to wherever I want the line to be, and then I just cut it out with the tin snips. And then you just kind of curve it to whatever body part you're trying to form this to. And then I just kept on making them smaller and a little bit smaller. That's a nice good thing with you when you start out with the biggest one, because after so many times you trace it, it gets smaller and smaller sort of by itself. You still, if you're really good with it, with making sure it doesn't get smaller and smaller, you have to kind of purposely do it, but it does help when you're doing that to do the biggest one first. On the inside here, you have to have pretty good duct tape. This is an Otter brand. It's like military grade, they call it, but we got it somewhat cheap. I'm surprised how good this duct tape is for it being as cheap as I got it. But it has to be pretty good duct tape. You can't have the cheap stuff for this, because the duct tape is really all that's holding these straps on. Next is the leather. I got this to be, it was upholstery leather that my mom had. She makes lampshades, and I forget how she got this from someone when she needed to make a lampshade for it. But anyway, she got it from an upholsterer, and it worked out great because it's black and it's somewhat good for making straps. Next thing that I did was, once I had cut out all these pieces, I sanded them all down to make them look nice. And then sooner I knew I was going to have to paint it. But on the inside, I made sure that I used the inside. I forgot to, but you're probably going to want to, if you are using oil barrel steel, you want to wipe it down as much as possible, possibly with Simply Green wipes or whatever, to try and get that oil off, because that's going to make it harder for the duct tape to stick. Next, what I did inside this was, you can kind of just tell, I kind of just took one piece at a time, put the strap about in the middle, and then I simply just put the duct tape on. To make it bond even better, if you look in between my in between each one of these layers, you can kind of see that there's a little bit of duct tape. You can see it right there. I just ever so slightly folded the duct tape over, but when you have the armor like this, it's invisible because it's underneath this armor, which makes it even harder for it to come off. And then you just simply overlap it over, and then you just keep on with that process. Only thing is this back one, you can't really do that unless you want it to look kind of nasty. So you have to hopefully make sure that there's enough duct tape for it to hold on. Whenever I'm wearing this, also the duct tape sort of comes off, but you just stick it back on and it normally holds pretty good because it's pulling against your own skin. And if you form it correctly, it shouldn't have much problems. Next thing that I did was when I cut out this leather, use scissors or whatever you have for cutting it out, I took like an X-Acto knife, like a knife like this, and I simply made a slit in there. And then I cut it like a point, and then you put it through. And then what you do is then once it's through, you use this little bolt that I found out of some airplane parts that we had from a friend of ours, and you use it sort of like a button. And then like on here, where the leather stretches a little bit naturally, that's the old hole. I moved it down a little bit more. You want to put it through when your arm is in there, and then you want to get it as close as you can, and it's not here right now, but you use a leather punch is the best thing. It will look sort of like pliers, but it'll have one of the parts of the pliers will have kind of a brass stopper on it, and then on the other side, right here, there'd be kind of a selector that will come down and you can select what size hole you want. You can find these like at any leather shop or something like that where you use leather. For if you didn't have that, you may be able to use like craft punches for like paper or something like that, but that would be pretty hard to get through this thick of leather. Otherwise, you'd have to probably stick with knife or something. That's sort of the tool you kind of need for this design. And then these would just kind of get stopped inside here. So it would be like a button kind of. I'll show you here. I'm going to have to put the camera down. Simply goes through here. Leather comes all the way through. And then once you get to the here, you'd have to push the button through one side, and then you just pop it out here. And I set it down again, sorry. And then you have to pop it through the other side. I luckily made my holes to the perfect size, so I actually have to screw my bolts through the hole, so it doesn't come off very easy. And then there's sort of your button. And then depending on if you want to have it so that you can wear clothes with this on, you use it like a fashion thing, that's sort of what I'm going to use it for a little bit. You can just keep on making holes to the desired sizes. So that's one of the things I liked about my design, is you can kind of make it smaller or bigger depending on if you have clothes on with it or not. Like with this, I couldn't fit it on because I made mine skin tight right now, so you can't have anything on over it or underneath it. Next thing I did was when I layered in the duct tape, you just would take the leather and just lay it in here, and then I took the duct tape and matted it down. Was I took you can barely see it here, but it's a nylon strap that I just used to help hold everything together and hold them from coming apart. You maybe could just use duct tape like this, but I was a little worried that it might come off. The next thing I did was, of course, I painted it. You can use like a wire brush like I did over here. That works pretty good. And then over here, what I also did was I used the stone to help buffer the edges, but I found that this works a little bit better in making them less sharp. You kind of want to do that unless you're going to put like a duct tape edge on it, where it wouldn't look quite as good, but you kind of do need to, otherwise it's going to get pretty hard on your, like right here, it's going to get pretty hard on the crook of your arm. And so also you need to watch it up here. The rest of it normally doesn't bother. You just really need to make sure that these two edges are pretty smooth. Next thing I did is I just spray painted it. Spray painted the whole thing. And I prefer Rust-Oleum. It's a really good brand. And I used flat black. How I did this is you have to be kind of a good painter. Just got a cheap little brush because it's gonna be, this brush is gonna be dead basically once you're done using it. You probably want to have two of them for a few spots where I had to go back over with the black. But other things you have to watch out for is that when you're trying to paint this, what I noticed is that let's say you make a mistake like I did sort of over here. You can kind of tell this is a little more sloppy, but I had to go back in with black paint. And the thing is that when the paints are not dry, it will start smudging and making kind of a grayish, crappy color between the two. So you have to watch out. You have to make sure that your paints, the paint that you're trying to paint over from a mistake, is dry. Otherwise, you're going to start having problems. I also used, again, Rust-Oleum Silver. Now, how you kind of do that with, like, you know, painting it is you just take, I used a Skippy peanut butter cap. It was the plastic was thick enough because otherwise I tried just using like a normal like red Solo cup or something like that, and the paint just ate right through it. It was just, I'm surprised that it would do that, but you know, they're both probably the same kind of product. If you really needed to try and save this brush, you could maybe use, what is that stuff? Either gasoline. Gasoline is pretty available, you know, although it's really expensive now, like frickin' $3 a gallon. But anyways, that and, I forget what the name of it is. Paint thinner would work. Yeah, paint thinner, that's it. Paint thinner would work to clean the brush up. Basically, yeah, that's how I made this thing. It's pretty awesome. I enjoy wearing it. Besides, it sometimes scratches me a little bit. Got to be watchful of that. Make sure you get them buffered up pretty